There is a tooth on the seafloor of every ocean on Earth. Not one tooth, millions of them, scattered across the sediment of the deep ocean floor, embedded in the coastal limestone of ancient shorelines, washing up on beaches from North Carolina to New Zealand to Morocco to Australia. Teeth the size of a human hand, serrated along both edges, triangular, dark brown or black, for millions of years of mineralization. Teeth that have been washing ashore for as long as human beings have been walking along coastlines, picking up strange things and wondering what they were. For most of human history, nobody knew what these teeth were. The ancient Greeks and Romans found them and called them glossoptery tongue stones, believing they were the petrified tongues of serpents, or the tears of the moon fallen to earth, or gifts from the gods with protective and medicinal properties. They wore them as amulets. They ground them into powder and used them as medicine. They traded them across the ancient Mediterranean world as objects of mystery and power. It was not until 1667 that a Danish scientist named Nicholas Steno looked at one of these tongue stones, a large, triangular, serrated object handed to him by the Duke of Tuscany, and recognized it for what it actually was. A shark tooth. Not the tooth of any shark alive in the seas of 1667, a tooth from a shark so large that the living sharks Steno knew, the sharks that fishermen brought to shore that he had dissected and studied, seemed almost trivial by comparison. A tooth from a shark whose size, inferred from the tooth, exceeded anything that Steno or anyone else had measured in a living animal. The tooth stones were shark teeth from a shark that was no longer alive. The mystery was not solved. It was only transformed from the mystery of what the stones were to the far deeper and more fascinating mystery of what animal had produced them. 100 facts about the largest predatory shark that has ever lived. This is Megalodon. The name Megalodon comes from the ancient Greek megas, meaning great, and odon, meaning tooth. Great tooth. It is, in the tradition of animal names derived from the most prominent feature of the animal, exactly right. The teeth of Megalodon are what we have. The teeth are what built its reputation. The teeth are what wash up on beaches, what divers find on the ocean floor, what collectors seek in the rock exposures of fossil-rich coastal formations around the world. Megalodon is a shark known almost entirely from its teeth, and its teeth are, by every measure, extraordinary, the largest teeth of any shark that has ever lived, serrated instruments of predation the size of a human hand, found in geological deposits spanning 20 million years of ocean history. The formal scientific name is Otodus megalodon, a designation that reflects the ongoing scientific debate about the classification of this animal within the broader shark family tree. Otodus is the genus, a group of large lamniform sharks with a lineage extending back into the Cretaceous period. Megalodon is the species. This naming, placing Megalodon within Otodus rather than within Carcharodon, the genus that contains the modern great white shark, is the current scientific consensus, and it has important implications for how we understand the animal's biology and its relationship to the sharks that share our modern oceans. We will come back to this. Megalodon lived from approximately 23 million years ago to approximately 3.6 million years ago, a span of nearly 20 million years from the early Miocene to the late Pliocene epoch. 20 million years. This is a number worth holding. T-Rex existed for perhaps 2 million years before its extinction. Modern humans have existed for perhaps 300,000 years. The species we call Homo sapiens has been anatomically modern for perhaps 100,000 years. Megalodon existed for 20 times as long as T-Rex, for 60 times as long as modern humans have existed, for 200 times as long as recorded human history. It was not a flash in the evolutionary record. It was a fixture, a long-term, stable, globally distributed apex predator that occupied the top of the marine food chain for an extraordinary duration. The oceans of the Miocene and Pliocene were Megalodon's oceans, in a way that no single species can be said to own the modern ocean. For 20 million years, the teeth accumulated, the teeth of animals that died in shallow coastal waters, their cartilaginous skeletons dissolving into the sediment, while the mineralized teeth survived, the teeth of animals that died in deep water, slowly sinking to the abyssal plain. The teeth shed naturally during feeding, sharks replaced their teeth continuously, and a single megalodon might have produced tens of thousands of teeth across its lifetime, sinking to the sea floor in their millions. Every major ocean on Earth received its quota of megalodon teeth across those 20 million years, and many of those teeth are still there, embedded in the sediment, eroding out of coastal formations, waiting for the beachcomber or the diver or the paleontologist who will find them. The most important thing to understand about Megalodon, the foundation on which every other fact in this episode rests, is that we do not have a skeleton. Not one complete skeleton, not even one reasonably complete partial skeleton, a handful of vertebrae from a handful of sites, and teeth, millions and millions of teeth. This is not unusual for sharks. The skeleton of a shark is made of cartilage, not bone. Cartilage is soft, flexible, organic tissue that does not mineralize in the way that bone does, and therefore does not fossilize under normal conditions. When a shark dies, its cartilaginous skeleton almost always decomposes entirely before any fossilization can occur. What persists are the teeth, which, in sharks, are mineralized with calcium phosphate in a process analogous to the mineralization of bone, and which can survive in the geological record for millions of years. The result is a fossil record of sharks that is almost entirely teeth. Thousands of shark species, ranging from the Devonian period to the present, known primarily or exclusively from their teeth. The shapes, sizes, and serration patterns of shark teeth are diurnal enough between species that identification is usually possible. But the teeth give us limited information about the rest of the animal, about its body proportions, its musculature, its internal anatomy. For Megalodon, everything we think we know about body size, body shape, swimming speed, and behavior is inferred from teeth and from the limited vertebral material, interpreted through comparison with living lamniform sharks. It is inference built on analogy, careful, scientifically grounded inference, but inference nonetheless. We are working with shadows, and yet from those shadows we have built a picture of extraordinary detail. The teeth of Megalodon are the largest shark teeth ever found. The largest confirmed specimen has a height, the slant height, measured along the edge of the tooth, of approximately 18.2 centimeters, nearly 20 centimeters, the length of a typical adult human hand from wrist to fingertip. Hold that image, a single tooth the size of your hand from a single animal. The teeth are triangular in outline, broad at the base, and tapering to a sharp point at the apex. The edges are serrated. Both the leading edge and the trailing edge carry a row of tiny, regular serrations that turn the tooth into a biological saw, cutting through tissue with extraordinary efficiency as the tooth is drawn through it. The root, the base of the tooth that anchored it in the jaw, is wide and robust, providing a stable foundation for the forces generated during a bite. The enameloid surface of the tooth, the hard, mineralized outer layer, is smooth and slightly convex on one side, flatter on the other, in a geometry that efficiently distributes the stresses of biting across the whole tooth structure. These teeth were not designed for crushing. They were not designed for holding. They were designed for cutting, for penetrating the thick skin and blubber of large prey animals, and then soaring through the flesh beneath with the serrated edges. The geometry of the tooth is the geometry of a precision cutting instrument, optimized by millions of years of evolution for a specific task. The task was killing large marine mammals, whales, and the teeth were very, very good at it. How large was Megalodon? This is the question that everyone asks, and that the scientific literature addresses with a degree of uncertainty that is often glossed over in popular accounts. The method most commonly used to estimate Megalodon body length is scaling from tooth size. In modern lamniform sharks, particularly the great white shark, which is the living species most commonly used as an analog for Megalodon, there are established relationships between tooth height and total body length. By measuring the height of Megalodon teeth and applying these scaling relationships, researchers can estimate the total body length of the animal. The results of these calculations, applied to the largest known Megalodon teeth, suggest body lengths in the range of 14 to 20 meters, roughly 46 to 66 feet. The lower end of that range, 14 to 15 meters, represents the most conservative, most defensible estimates derived from the most rigorous scaling relationships. The upper end, 18 to 20 meters, represents the extrapolations based on the very largest teeth and the most generous scaling assumptions. The most commonly cited estimate in the recent scientific literature is approximately 15 to 18 meters for the largest individuals, with typical adults probably averaging somewhat smaller, perhaps 10 to 14 meters for the population as a whole. To put these numbers in context, the largest confirmed great white shark on record measured approximately 6.1 meters. The whale shark, the largest fish alive today, reaches approximately 12 meters at its maximum. The sperm whale, the largest predatory animal alive today, reaches approximately 20 meters. Megalodon, at its maximum estimated size, was the largest predatory fish that has ever lived, larger than any shark alive today, larger than most toothed whales, a predator operating at a scale that the modern ocean simply does not contain. The weight of Megalodon is even more difficult to estimate than its length, because mass scales with the cube of linear dimensions, and small errors in the length estimate translate into large errors in the mass estimate. Current estimates for the mass of very large Megalodon individuals range from approximately 50 to 70 metric tons, 50 to 70 tons. For comparison, the largest confirmed great white shark weighed approximately 1 ton. The sperm whale weighs approximately 40 tons. A very large Megalodon outweighed the largest predatory animal alive today. At 50 to 70 tons, Megalodon was among the heaviest predatory animals that has ever existed, exceeded in mass only by the largest filter-feeding whales, which are not predators in the conventional sense, and by the largest sauropod dinosaurs, which were herbivores. A predatory animal at 50 to 70 tons, armed with teeth the size of a human hand, hunting large whales in the Miocene Ocean. The picture is difficult to hold. It is simply too large, too extreme, too far beyond the scale of anything in our direct experience. But the teeth say so, the vertebrae say so. The bite marks on whale bones say so. It was real. The bite force of Megalodon has been estimated through biomechanical modeling, using the size and geometry of the teeth and jaws, and the estimated muscle mass derived from scaling relationships with living sharks, to calculate the forces that could be generated in a bite. The results are extraordinary. Estimates of Megalodon bite force range from approximately 108,000 to 182,000 newtons, roughly 10,000 to 18,000 kilograms of force applied to the contact point of the bite. To put this in context, the bite force of a large adult male great white shark has been measured at approximately 18,000 newtons. A T-Rex, in the most widely cited estimates, had a bite force of approximately 35,000 to 57,000 newtons. The saltwater crocodile, often cited as having the most powerful bite of any living animal, has been measured at approximately 16,000 newtons. Megalodon's bite force exceeds all of these. At its upper estimate, it is approximately 3 times the bite force of T-Rex and 10 times the bite force of a great white shark. It is, by any measure, one of the most powerful bites ever generated by any animal that has ever lived. This bite force was not for crushing shells or cracking bones in the manner of a hyena or a crocodile. It was for penetrating the thick skin, blubber, and muscle of very large whale prey, for driving those enormous, serrated teeth through the protective outer layers of an animal whose mass might be comparable to the predator's own, and then drawing them back out through a sawing action that created wounds of catastrophic dimensions. The bite of Megalodon was designed for one purpose: killing very large things. The prey of Megalodon was primarily large marine mammals, specifically the diverse and abundant cetaceans of the Miocene and Pliocene oceans. The Miocene epoch, roughly 23 to 5 million years ago, was, in terms of cetacean diversity, one of the richest periods in the history of ocean life. The whales that had first colonized the ocean in the Eocene, tens of millions of years earlier, had by the Miocene diversified into an extraordinary variety of forms. Filter-feeding baleen whales of multiple families, various lineages of toothed whales, including the ancestors of modern dolphins and porpoises, strange and now extinct forms, the archaic toothed whales called odontocetes, some of which were very large, some of which were ecologically specialized in ways that have no modern equivalent. This diversity of whale prey meant that Megalodon was operating in one of the richest prey environments in the history of the ocean. Everywhere it went, there were cetaceans to hunt, some small enough to take in a single strike, some large enough to require the coordinated attack strategy that fossil evidence suggests Megalodon used for larger prey. The Miocene ocean was Megalodon's larder, and the larder was extraordinarily well-stocked. The direct evidence for Megalodon predation on whales comes from fossil whale bones, specifically from cetacean bones that bear the characteristic marks of Megalodon teeth. These marks are found on whale bones from multiple Miocene and Pliocene formations around the world. They include parallel gouge marks, the linear scratches left when Megalodon teeth are dragged across bone, and puncture marks, where a tooth has penetrated directly into the bone surface. The spacing and geometry of these marks, compared with the known dimensions of Megalodon teeth, confirms that the shark was responsible. No other animal in the Miocene ocean produced marks of this size and this geometry. Some of the most revealing evidence comes from whale bones that bear marks consistent with a specific attack strategy. In several specimens, the marks are concentrated on the bones of the flippers, the pectoral appendages, and on the posterior end of the body. This pattern has been interpreted as evidence of a disabling strike hunting strategy, the shark targeting the locomotory appendages of its prey first, immobilizing it before going in for the killing bite to a more vulnerable area. This is analogous to the hunting strategy used by modern great white sharks when attacking large prey, striking first at the tail or the flippers, disabling the prey's ability to escape, then waiting for it to weaken from blood loss before completing the kill. The disabling strike strategy makes sense for a predator hunting prey of comparable or greater mass. A direct bite to the body of a large whale, while the whale is still capable of full locomotion and full defensive response, is dangerous to the predator. A strike to the flipper or tail, less dangerous to attempt, potentially disabling to the prey, is a more efficient first move. Megalodon was not simply a giant mouth that bit at whatever was available. It was a sophisticated predator with a hunting strategy calibrated to the specific challenges of killing very large, fast-moving, defensively capable prey. The ocean that Megalodon inhabited was not the ocean we know today. The Miocene and Pliocene world had a diurent geography, a diuret climate, and a diuret set of ocean currents from the modern world, and these diurences were directly relevant to Megalodon's ecology and ultimately to its extinction. In the early and middle Miocene, sea temperatures were generally warmer than today, particularly at mid and high latitudes. The oceanic circulation was diuret. The continents were in positions that allowed ocean currents to flow in patterns very diurent from modern ones. Most significantly, the gap between North and South America was open. What is now Panama was a sea channel, allowing water to flow between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans in a way that has not been possible for the last 3 to 4 million years. This open connection between the Pacific and Atlantic meant that the oceanic circulation of the Miocene was fundamentally diurent from the modern system. The warm, nutrient-rich waters of the tropics were distributed diurently. The cold, upwelling currents that dominate the modern eastern Pacific were weaker or absent in some regions. The temperature gradient between the tropics and the poles was smaller. For Megalodon, this warm, broadly connected Miocene ocean was ideal. The warm waters supported the rich cetacean communities that were its primary prey. The open oceanic connections allowed the shark to range widely across the global ocean. The relatively stable climate of the early and middle Miocene maintained the conditions that Megalodon required. And then, from about 8 million years ago onward, things began to change. The climate cooling that began in the late Miocene and accelerated into the Pliocene is the primary environmental factor associated with the eventual extinction of Megalodon. The cooling was driven by multiple factors. The continued drift of the continents, particularly the gradual northward movement of Antarctica, which became increasingly isolated as the Southern Ocean opened and as the circumpolar currents strengthened, drove the formation of large Antarctic ice sheets. The closure of the Central American Seaway, the final closure of the gap between North and South America that created the Isthmus of Panama, approximately 3 to 4 million years ago, fundamentally reorganized the oceanic circulation of both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. The consequences for the marine environment were profound. Water temperatures dropped, particularly in the higher latitudes. The distribution of productive upwelling zones changed. The prey communities of the ocean shifted in response, some species declining, some moving their ranges, some going extinct. For Megalodon, several of these changes were specifically damaging. The warming of tropical waters that Megalodon used as nursery habitat, shallow, warm coastal waters where juveniles were raised in relative safety from larger predators, cooled. The shallow, warm coastal seas that had been available across a broad latitudinal range in the early and middle Miocene contracted toward the tropics as global temperatures fell. The cetacean communities that Megalodon depended on changed. Some of the large whales that had been abundant in warmer Miocene waters became less common or shifted their distributions toward higher latitudes, following the cold water prey that they themselves depended on. And a new competitor appeared. Among the factors that may have contributed to Megalodon's extinction, the rise of the modern great white shark is among the most discussed and among the most scientifically controversial. The great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, appears in the fossil record at roughly the same time that Megalodon is declining. The timing of this appearance, coinciding with the cooling of the late Miocene and early Pliocene oceans, has suggested to some researchers that the great white is a direct competitor of Megalodons, competing for the same prey in the same environments and ultimately contributing to the larger shark's extinction. The competition hypothesis is biologically plausible. Great white sharks and Megalodon would have had overlapping prey preferences. Both targeted large marine mammals. Great whites are known to preferentially hunt pinnipeds, seals, and sea lions, which became increasingly abundant in the cooler waters of the Pliocene. Megalodon may have had Diuochauti competing for this prey resource as it shifted to high-latitude cold water, where the great white was better physiologically adapted. But the competition hypothesis is contested. The evidence for direct competitive interaction between the two species is indirect, circumstantial correlations in the timing of their appearance and disappearance, rather than direct fossil evidence of competition. And the extinction of Megalodon is almost certainly multi-causal, not the result of competition alone, but of a combination of prey availability changes, habitat changes, and possibly competition from multiple directions simultaneously. The great white shark did not kill Megalodon, but in the reorganizing ocean of the late Pliocene, it may have been one more pressure in an accumulation of pressures that the giant shark could not ultimately survive. There was another large predator in the Miocene ocean that shared the apex predator niche with Megalodon, one that is less well known to the public, but that represents a genuinely formidable competitor in ecological terms. Livyatan melvillae. Named in honor of Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick, Livyatan was a giant sperm whale, an enormous toothed cetacean that lived in the Miocene Ocean of what is now Peru, in deposits dated to approximately 12 to 13 million years ago. But Leviathan was not the kind of sperm whale we know today. The modern sperm whale has functional teeth only in the lower jaw. It hunts primarily by echolocation, using suction to capture squid in the deep ocean. Leviathan had enormous functional teeth in both the upper and lower jaw, teeth up to 36 centimeters in length, making them among the largest teeth of any animal ever, and it had a skull almost 3 meters long, with enormous temporal foci indicating massive jaw-closing muscles. Leviathan was a raptorial predator, a whale that hunted large prey actively, using its enormous teeth to kill other large marine mammals. It was, in ecological terms, a giant killer whale, the sperm whale equivalent of what Megalodon was in the shark world. The two animals coexisted in the Miocene Pacific. They hunted in overlapping areas, competing for the same large whale prey. Whether they ever directly attacked each other is not established, but the ecological overlap between a 15-meter predatory shark and a 13-meter predatory whale with 36-centimeter teeth must have produced competitive interactions of considerable intensity. The Miocene Ocean was not a world with a single apex predator. It was a world with multiple apex predators, competing and coexisting in a complex, species-rich ecosystem that has no modern equivalent. The nursery areas of Megalodon, the warm, shallow coastal waters where juveniles were born and raised, are one of the most fascinating aspects of the animal's ecology, and one of the best documented through the fossil record. Several geological formations around the world have yielded concentrations of small Megalodon teeth whose size indicates they came from juvenile or subadult individuals in associations with other fauna consistent with warm, shallow coastal environments. The most famous of these is the Calvert Formation of Maryland and Virginia, which has produced juvenile Megalodon teeth alongside the bones of various small cetaceans and other coastal marine animals. Similar concentrations of juvenile material have been found in the Bone Valley Formation of Florida, in the Gatan Formation of Panama, and in various Miocene coastal formations in Europe. The pattern these sites suggest is one of specific habitat use for juvenile Megalodon, the use of warm, shallow, productive coastal waters as nursery grounds, where juveniles could find abundant smaller prey while being partially protected from the open ocean threats that would face a small shark in deeper water. This nursery habitat strategy is used by many modern shark species. Great white sharks use specific coastal areas as nurseries. Sandbar sharks have well-documented nursery areas in specific bays and estuaries. The use of protected shallow water environments by juvenile sharks is a widespread ecological strategy that reduces mortality in the most vulnerable life stage. For Megalodon, the specific requirements of these nursery habitats, warm, shallow, productive coastal water, may have been a critical vulnerability when the climate cooled and those habitats shrank or shifted toward the tropics in the late Pliocene. The question of whether Megalodon was warm-bodied, whether it maintained an elevated body temperature above that of the surrounding water, is one that has been addressed through isotopic chemistry in recent years, with results that significantly change how we picture this animal's physiology and ecology. Modern lamniform sharks, the group that includes both Megalodon and the great white shark, are notable among living fish for being partially warm-blooded. They use a system of countercurrent heat exchanges, called retia mirabilia, to retain metabolic heat generated by their swimming muscles, maintaining certain body regions, particularly the swimming muscles and the brain, at temperatures significantly above the surrounding water. This regional endothermy, as it is called, is what allows great white sharks to range into relatively cold waters without losing the muscle performance that cold would otherwise impose. A warm-muscled shark swims faster and reacts more quickly than a cold-muscled shark of equivalent size. Isotopic analysis of Megalodon teeth, specifically the oxygen isotope ratios preserved in the enameloid of the teeth, provides direct evidence of the body temperature at which those teeth were formed, and the results are consistent with what we would expect for a shark, with regional endothermy comparable to or exceeding that of the modern great white. Megalodon teeth show isotopic signatures consistent with body temperatures several degrees above the surrounding water. Megalodon was a warm-bodied shark, not warm-blooded in the way of a mammal, not maintaining a constant core body temperature regardless of environment, but warm enough in the muscles and brain to be significantly faster and more reactive than a fully ectothermic shark of equivalent size. This warm-bodiedness has implications for our understanding of Megalodon's ecology. A warm-bodied predator can range into cooler waters than a cold-bodied equivalent, which may be why Megalodon was able to maintain a global distribution across such a wide range of water temperatures. But a warm-bodied predator also requires more food to maintain the elevated metabolism, which may have made Megalodon more vulnerable to the decline in prey availability that accompanied the cooling of the Pleistocene Ocean. Warm bodies come at a cost, and in the Pliocene that cost may have become, eventually, too high to pay. Megalodon is definitively extinct. This needs to be stated clearly and emphatically because popular culture, including, notoriously, a 2013 Discovery Channel program that presented a fabricated documentary claiming Megalodon was still alive, has created genuine confusion about this fact in the public mind. The program was fiction presented as documentary. It was not based on evidence. It was, by every scientific measure, misinformation. Megalodon is extinct. We know this with the same confidence that we know any negative claim about the fossil record can be known. The most recent confirmed Megalodon teeth have been dated to approximately 3.6 million years ago. Since that date, across 3.6 million years of geological record, no Megalodon tooth has been found, not a single one. In the vast accumulation of Pliocene, Pleistocene, and Holocene marine sediments that have been collected and analyzed from oceans around the world, sediments that routinely preserve shark teeth from modern species in abundance, there is no Megalodon. The ocean is not unexplored. We have detailed knowledge of the distribution and abundance of shark species in every major ocean basin. Modern large shark species are routinely caught in commercial fisheries, observed by researchers, and detected by acoustic monitoring. An animal of Megalodon's size, a 15-meter, 50-ton shark, could not persist in the modern ocean without leaving evidence. The absence of evidence, in this case, is evidence of absence. The systematic, global, decades-long failure to find any Megalodon tooth younger than 3.6 million years, any live capture, any carcass, any reliable observation, is definitive. Megalodon is gone. It has been gone for nearly 4 million years. The extinction of Megalodon, whatever its specific causes, was one of the most significant ecological events in the history of the marine environment. The loss of a predator at Megalodon scale, a predator that had been shaping the ecology of the ocean for 20 million years, controlling the populations of large cetaceans, influencing the distribution and behavior of virtually every large marine animal in every ocean on Earth, was not simply the removal of one species from the ecosystem. It was the removal of the apex regulatory mechanism of the Miocene and Pliocene marine world, the top-down force that had shaped the evolution of prey animals across 20 million years, the selective pressure that had driven the evolution of whale defenses, speed, cooperative behavior, body size, in exactly the same way that terrestrial predators drive the evolution of their prey. With Megalodon gone, the ocean was, in an ecological sense, released from a constraint. Whale populations that had been regulated by predation pressure, kept below the carrying capacity of their food resources by the constant culling of the largest, the slowest, the most vulnerable individuals, were suddenly free to increase. The post-Megalodon Pliocene and Pleistocene oceans saw a radiation of large whale species, including the blue whale, the largest animal that has ever existed, which reaches lengths of 30 meters and weights approaching 180 tons. The blue whale achieved its extraordinary size in a world without Megalodon. Whether it could have reached that size in a world where a 50-ton apex predator actively hunted large cetaceans is an interesting speculative question. What we can say is that the ocean after Megalodon was diurent from the ocean before it, diurently structured, diurent in the populations of its large animals, diurent in the relationships between predator and prey at the apex of the marine food web. Megalodon's extinction was not just the end of a species, it was the end of a world. The fossil record of Megalodon is extraordinarily widespread, found on every continent except Antarctica, in marine sediments ranging from the early Miocene to the late Pliocene, and this global distribution reflects the animal's status as a truly cosmopolitan apex predator. Megalodon teeth have been found in North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. They have been found in deposits representing warm tropical seas and cooler temperate seas. They have been found in shallow coastal formations and in deep-sea sediments. They have been found at depths from the intertidal zone to several kilometers below the ocean surface. This global distribution is not surprising for an apex predator in a fully connected Miocene ocean. The ocean currents of the Miocene provided pathways for large, mobile marine animals to move between basins. A Megalodon individual might travel thousands of kilometers in the course of its life, following prey distributions, moving between feeding and nursery areas, responding to seasonal changes in the availability of resources. The global tooth distribution is the record of 20 million years of individual. Megalodon lives, each leaving its teeth at the locations where it fed, where it died, where it shed the continuous flow of replacements that the shark tooth replacement system produces. Every tooth on every beach and every ocean floor is the trace of an individual animal at a specific place and a specific time in the long history of a species that outlasted most of the dinosaurs in geological duration. The discovery history of Megalodon as a scientific subject has its own extraordinary narrative, one that spans from the ancient world's puzzlement over tongue stones to the cutting-edge isotopic and molecular analyses of the present day. Nicholas Steno's 1667 recognition of the tongue stones as shark teeth was the first major step, but Steno could not name the species or estimate its size with confidence. He simply established the identity of the material as a biological rather than a magical object. The formal scientific description of Megalodon came in 1843 from the great Swiss naturalist Louis Agassiz, one of the most influential scientists of the 19th century and the man who established the field of ichthyology on a rigorous scientific basis. Agassiz examined teeth from multiple European collections and correctly identified them as belonging to a single, extraordinary species of extinct shark. He placed the species in the genus Carcharodon, the genus that also contains the modern great white shark, and gave it the species name Megalodon. Agassiz's placement of Megalodon and Carcharodon reflected the anatomical similarities between the two species' teeth. Both have large, triangular, serrated teeth. The similarity seemed sufficient in 1843 to suggest close relationship. This placement persisted in the scientific literature for over a century and a half. The popular image of Megalodon as essentially a supersized great white shark is a direct consequence of Agassiz's original classification. But the relationship between Megalodon and the great white shark has been progressively revised as our understanding of shark phylogenetics has improved. The current consensus placing Megalodon in the genus Otodus as part of the extinct Otodontidae family, distinct from the Lamnidae family that contains the great white, is based on detailed analysis of tooth microstructure, tooth morphology, and the evolutionary history of both lineages in the fossil record. Megalodon and the great white shark are not closely related. They are distantly related members of the same broad order Lamniformes, but they represent diurent evolutionary lineages that have independently evolved large, triangular, serrated teeth in response to similar ecological pressures. The resemblance is convergence, not kinship. The fact that Megalodon and the great white shark are not closely related has important implications for how we reconstruct Megalodon's biology. For decades, the great white was used as the primary anatomical and physiological model for Megalodon, as if the giant shark was simply a very large version of the living species. The jaw reconstructions, the body shape models, the swimming speed estimates, all were based on the assumption that Megalodon and the great white were essentially similar in body plan, scaled to diurn sizes. If Megalodon was more closely related to Otodus obliquus and its relatives, the otodontid lineage, than to the great white, its body proportions may have been somewhat diurent. The exact nature of those diurences is uncertain, because we lack the skeletal material to directly compare, but some researchers have suggested that Megalodon may have had a proportionally larger head and jaws relative to body length than the great white, consistent with the anatomy of other otodontid relatives. The uncertainty is real, and it is worth acknowledging honestly rather than glossing over, because the acknowledgement is itself scientifically important. We are working with limited data. The conclusions we draw are our best current interpretations of that limited data, and they are subject to revision, as all scientific conclusions are, as new evidence emerges. Megalodon, as we understand it today, is a reconstruction, a carefully, rigorously produced reconstruction, informed by the best available evidence and by the tools of modern paleontological science, but a reconstruction nonetheless. The shark itself is in the teeth, and the teeth, for all their extraordinary preservation, do not give us everything. There is a specific formation in the eastern United States that has produced more high-quality Megalodon material than perhaps any other site in the world, and that serves as a kind of pilgrimage destination for collectors and researchers who study this animal. The Lee Creek Mine in Aurora, North Carolina, operated by the Potash Corporation and its successors as a commercial phosphate mine, has exposed Miocene marine sediments in quantities that have made it one of the most productive fossil sites in North America. The Pongo River Formation, exposed by the mine's operations, was deposited in a warm, shallow, nutrient-rich sea approximately 15 to 17 million years ago, the Middle Miocene, when Megalodon was at the height of its abundance and distribution. From these sediments, thousands of Megalodon teeth have been collected by paleontologists, by commercial collectors, and by the many amateur fossil hunters who have legally visited the spoil piles of the mine operation over the decades. The collection from Lee Creek spans the full range of Megalodon tooth sizes, from the small teeth of juveniles to the enormous teeth of very large adults, and represents the most complete picture of Megalodon tooth size variation from any single population in the fossil record. The teeth from Lee Creek, combined with the cetacean material found in the same deposits, give us a snapshot of the Megalodon ecosystem in the Middle Miocene of what is now the Carolina coast, a warm, productive coastal sea rich in whales and other marine mammals, with Megalodon as its apex predator. Aurora, North Carolina, is a small town built on the edge of a Miocene ocean, and in the phosphate that underlies it, the record of that ocean is still being recovered. Let us talk about what the world looked like from the water surface, from a position just above the waterline of the Miocene Ocean, at a time and place where Megalodon was present and active. The visual scene would have been, at first glance, not entirely diurn from a modern ocean. Waves, sky, perhaps coastline in the distance, forested in the Miocene vegetation of the period, a school of fish breaking the surface nearby, the distant arc of a dolphin's leap. But the scale of things beneath the surface would have been diurent. The shadow of a large animal passing beneath the hull of a hypothetical boat would have been much larger than any fish or shark shadow we can imagine from modern experience. The shadow would have been first the width of a large whale, and then would have resolved, as it approached the surface, into a shape that was not whale-shaped, not the round-headed, wide-bodied silhouette of a baleen whale, a shark silhouette, wide pectoral fins, asymmetric tail, the classic torpedo form, but a torpedo the size of a small ship. The surface break, if the animal came to the surface, as large sharks occasionally do, perhaps to investigate or to attack prey near the surface, would have been dramatic. A dorsal fin measuring perhaps 2 meters from base to tip, cutting through the water, a wake, and then the animal itself, briefly visible, before it submerged again into the blue. We can describe this, we can reconstruct it, but we cannot quite feel it, the scale of it, the physical reality of an animal that large moving through the water with the euphancy of a perfected predator. The human mind is not calibrated for it, which is perhaps why Megalodon continues to fascinate us long after the scientific questions about it have been largely resolved. It is not just an interesting paleontological specimen, it is a scale reference, a reminder that the world we inhabit, the ocean we look at when we stand at the edge of a beach, was once inhabited by something that exceeds our capacity for full imaginative grasp. The ocean looks the same, but it contains something like this, not long ago in geological terms, not long ago at all. The cultural footprint of Megalodon is in some ways disproportionate to what we actually know about it scientifically. The limited fossil record, teeth, and a handful of vertebrae should perhaps support a more modest public profile, but Megalodon has become one of the most recognizable prehistoric animals in popular culture, rivaling the most famous dinosaurs in name recognition and exceeding most of them in the volume of media attention it receives. The films alone tell the story. The 2018 film The Meg, based loosely on a 1997 novel by Steve Alton, grossed over $500 million worldwide, more than many dinosaur-themed films. The 2023 sequel grossed a similar amount. Whatever the scientific inaccuracies in these productions, and there are many, they reflect and reinforce a genuine, widespread popular fascination with the giant shark that no amount of scientific demystification can fully dampen. Why does Megalodon fascinate so deeply? Part of the answer is simply scale. Size fascinates. The largest of any category, the tallest mountain, the deepest trench, the longest river, commands attention in a way that the merely large does not. Megalodon was the largest predatory fish that ever lived. That superlative demands attention. Part of the answer is the ocean itself, the fact that Megalodon inhabited the deep, partly unknown world of the sea, a realm that still carries associations of mystery and menace that the land does not. The ocean is not our environment. We cannot see into it from the surface, and the knowledge that it once contained something of this size, this capability, this predatory power, connects to something primal in the human response to the unknown depths. And part of the answer is the teeth, the fact that you can hold a Megalodon tooth in your hand, that for a few $100 or a few hours of beach walking at the right tide, you can possess a physical object that was once part of the largest predatory shark in the history of life. The democratization of fossil access, the fact that Megalodon teeth are abundant enough and distributed widely enough that they are genuinely available to ordinary people, gives this animal a tangibility that most extinct creatures lack. The teeth are the animal. You can hold the animal in your hand, and that holding, that physical contact with something 65 million years removed from the present, is one of the most direct experiences of deep time available to anyone without a paleontology degree. Before we reach the final facts, let us acknowledge something that is sometimes lost in the excitement over Megalodon's size and its extraordinary teeth. Megalodon was not a monster. The word monster is a moral word. It implies something threatening, something beyond the natural order, something that should not exist. Megalodon was not any of these things. It was an animal, a large, highly specialized, ecologically central animal that occupied its position in the Miocene and Pliocene ocean as naturally and as necessarily as any other species in any other ecosystem. It was the apex predator of a rich ocean. It hunted large prey using evolved strategies calibrated to the specific challenges of that prey. It raised its young in protected nursery habitats. It ranged widely across the global ocean, following the resources it needed. It existed in balance with its ecosystem, as apex predators always do, their populations regulated by the availability of prey, their behavior shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. It was not threatening to human beings, because human beings did not exist when Megalodon was alive. The Miocene ocean had no humans in it, no boats, no fishing lines, no one to be afraid of the shadow passing beneath the surface. The fear is ours. The retrospective, imaginative fear that popular culture projects onto Megalodon, the fear of the enormous, the unknown, the predator beyond all scale, is a human emotion applied to an animal that had no awareness of us, no relationship with us, no relevance to our species at all. Megalodon was magnificent. It was extraordinary. It was, by any ecological measure, one of the most impressive predators in the history of life. But it was not a monster. It was a shark, the largest shark, a shark in its ocean, doing what sharks do in a world that was before our world, and that produced, as all worlds produce, the extraordinary as well as the ordinary. We are at the final facts, the last few items in the list of 100 things that the fossil record and the science applied to it can tell us about this animal. The oldest known Megalodon teeth, the teeth marking the beginning of the species in the fossil record, are found in deposits dated to approximately 23 million years ago in the early Miocene. These earliest teeth are somewhat diurent in form from the classic large Megalodon teeth of the middle Miocene, small, with slightly diurent proportions, reflecting the animal's initial divergence from its otodus ancestors. The evolutionary lineage that produced Megalodon extends further back through Otodus obliquus in the Eocene, through various intermediate forms in the Oligocene, to a continuous lineage of large, triangular-toothed sharks reaching deep into the Cretaceous. Megalodon was the culmination of over 40 million years of evolutionary experimentation with large, laminiform shark body plans. 40 million years of refinement produced the largest predatory fish in history, and that history, written in the teeth of its predecessors, is one of the most detailed evolutionary narratives available from the shark fossil record. The youngest confirmed Megalodon teeth, the material that tells us the species end point, are found in deposits dated to approximately 3.6 million years ago in the late Pliocene. There have been occasional claims of younger material, teeth claimed to date to 10,000 years ago, or even less, from deep-sea sediment cores in the Pacific. These claims generated considerable public excitement when they were first publicized, because if confirmed, they would suggest that Megalodon survived far more recently than the current consensus holds. But the claims have not held up to scientific scrutiny. The dating of loose teeth from deep-sea sediment cores is notoriously duplicate. Teeth can be reworked from older deposits and incorporated into younger sediment layers, giving false apparent ages that are much younger than the tooth's actual geological origin. The proposed young dates for these specific teeth are now considered, by most researchers in the field, to reflect reworking of older material rather than genuine late survival of the species. Megalodon's last confirmed presence in the fossil record is approximately 3.6 million years ago. This date is based on well-dated stratigraphic material from multiple sites, using modern radiometric dating methods that are far more reliable than the deep-sea sediment core approach. 3.6 million years ago, the last Megalodon, somewhere in the cooling Pliocene ocean, in conditions that were less and less favorable for an animal of its specific ecological requirements. The last Megalodon did not know it was the last. It was simply an animal in an ocean doing what it had always done in conditions that were slowly and irresistibly becoming worse, until there were none left, until the teeth stopped accumulating in the sediment of the world's oceans, until the ocean moved on. The ocean that exists today, the ocean that laps against every coast, that covers 70% of the surface of this planet, that sustains the most complex and diverse communities of life on Earth, is the ocean that outlasted Megalodon. It is an ocean that is, in some ways, simpler than the Miocene Ocean. It lacks the diversity of large cetaceans that the Miocene ocean sustained. It lacks the extraordinary variety of large apex predators, the megalodons, the leviathans, the diverse giant sharks that competed and coexisted in the rich Miocene Sea. It has been shaped by the extinctions of the Pliocene and Pleistocene, by the ice ages, by the ongoing and accelerating impact of human activity on marine ecosystems. It is a diminished ocean, by Miocene standards, smaller in the scale of its apex predators, less structurally complex in the relationships between its largest animals, less ancient in the lineages that currently dominate it. And yet it is also the most extraordinary place on this planet. It contains the blue whale, the largest animal that has ever existed. It contains the great white shark, the sperm whale, the orca, the leatherback turtle, animals of extraordinary capability and ecological importance, shaped by millions of years of evolution in the post-Megalodon world. The ocean is not the same as it was, but it is alive, it is full, it is, by any standard except the impossible standard of the Miocene, magnificent. And in its sediments, on its floors, in its coastal formations, eroding slowly out of ancient limestone on beaches around the world, the teeth of Megalodon are still there, still washing ashore, still being picked up by beachcombers who turn them over in their hands and ask, for the 1000th time in human history, what extraordinary animal this came from. The question has an answer now. We know what made the tooth. We know how large the animal was, what it ate, how it hunted, where it lived, and why, eventually, it died. We know not completely, not without uncertainty, not without the ongoing revision that science requires of all its conclusions, but we know. And the knowing, accumulated across 350 years of scientific eewit, from Nicholas Stanot turning a tongue stone over in his hands in 1667 to the isotopic chemists analyzing Megalodon enameloid in their laboratories today, is one of the great achievements of human curiosity applied to the ancient world. The great tooth is gone, but we know it, and in knowing it, we know something about the ocean that has existed on this planet for 4 billion years, about its capacity for the extraordinary, its willingness to sustain the most extreme experiments in biology, its patient record-keeping in the sediment of its floors. The ocean keeps its records in stone, and we are the species that learn to read them. There was 100 facts about Megalodon, the largest predatory shark that ever lived, the great tooth of the Miocene Ocean, the animal whose teeth wash up on beaches around the world, whose bite force exceeded T-Rex, whose prey were the large whales of a richer and warmer ancient sea, and whose extinction 3.6 million years ago changed the ocean in ways we are still working to understand. 100 facts, and the animal for all of them is still larger in the imagination than in the fossil record, still exceeding what we can quite hold in our minds, still, in the way of all truly extraordinary things, slightly beyond the reach of complete description. The teeth are on the seafloor, the teeth are on the beaches, pick one up, hold it. For a moment, the Miocene Ocean is in your hand. This has been Sleepy Dino. Good night. Let us go deeper into the teeth themselves, because the teeth of Megalodon, for all that we have said about them, deserve more than a passing description. They are the primary evidence. They are the animal, in the only form in which we can hold it, and understanding them in their full biological and chemical complexity is understanding Megalodon as directly as science currently allows. A Megalodon tooth is not simply a hard object shaped like a triangle. It is a layered, structurally complex biological product, a composite material built by the tooth-forming cells of the shark's jaw across weeks or months of continuous mineralization. The outermost layer, the enameloid, is the hardest biological material produced by any shark. It is formed from interlocking, precisely oriented crystals of fluoropatite, a calcium phosphate mineral with a specific crystallographic structure that gives it extraordinary hardness and resistance to wear. The crystal orientation within the enameloid is not random. The crystals are arranged in a specific pattern, with the long axes of the crystals perpendicular to the tooth surface in the outer layer and more randomly oriented in the inner enameloid that maximizes hardness at the surface while providing some degree of crack resistance beneath. This architecture, a hard outer layer over slightly more compliant inner layer, is the same general strategy used in modern dental enamel, in the shells of mollusks, and in various other biological hard structures. Evolution has discovered the optimal composite structure for hard, wear-resistant biological materials repeatedly in unrelated lineages because the physics of hard materials makes this the best available solution. The root of the tooth, the portion that anchored it in the jaw, is made of a diurate material, orthodentine, a bone-like tissue that is softer and more flexible than the enameloid. The root provided the mechanical compliance needed to absorb the forces of biting without transmitting all of that force directly to the jaw bones, a biological shock absorber built into the foundation of each tooth. And the serrations, the tiny, regular teeth on the tooth that make Megalodon's cutting edge so acute, are not random surface features. They are carefully patterned, with specific spacing and angle that maximizes cutting efficiency for the specific materials they were designed to cut: shark blubber, whale skin, the dense connective tissue of large marine mammals. The serrations of Megalodon's teeth were not simply present, they were optimized by millions of years of selection for teeth that cut large marine mammals most efficiently. The replacement rate of Megalodon's teeth is another detail that, when considered, gives us a richer picture of the animal's biology. Modern sharks have multiple rows of teeth, typically 5 to 15 rows, arranged one behind the other in each jaw, with only the outermost row fully functional at any given time. As the outermost teeth are shed through use or damage, the next row behind moves forward to replace them. The process is continuous. A shark replaces each tooth on a schedule of weeks to months, depending on the species and the rate of tooth use. For Megalodon, with a jaw that contained perhaps 276 teeth across 5 rows, based on scaling from closely related odontid species, the tooth replacement production was prodigious. If each tooth was replaced on a schedule comparable to modern large lamniform sharks, perhaps every 1 to 2 months, a single Megalodon might have produced several thousand teeth across its lifetime. Several thousand teeth from a single individual, shed into the water, sinking to the seafloor, accumulating in the sediment. Multiply that by the number of Megalodon individuals alive at any given time, across 20 million years of continuous existence, and the total tooth production of the species across its entire history is an astronomical number. Billions of teeth, settling to the floor of every ocean where Megalodon hunted, across 20 million years of geological time. Most of those teeth have been destroyed, buried under later sediment, dissolved by the slightly acidic conditions of some seafloor environments, physically broken down by geological processes, but a remarkable fraction has survived, and those survivors, the millions of Megalodon teeth that can still be found in coastal formations and on ocean floors around the world, are the largest and most complete biological record of any shark species that has ever existed. The teeth are everywhere because Megalodon was everywhere, and because it was everywhere for a very long time, producing teeth at a prodigious rate across 20 million years of continuous existence. There is a discovery from the deep Pacific seaboard that, for a brief period in the 1990s and early 2000s, was misinterpreted as evidence for Megalodon's recent survival, and that is worth examining in some detail, because the story of the discovery and its misinterpretation illustrates something important about how science handles unexpected evidence. In the 1990s, researchers examining ferromanganese crusts from the Pacific seafloor found Megalodon teeth that appeared, based on their position within the crust layers, to have been incorporated into the crust very recently, within the last 10,000 to 100,000 years. If the age determination was correct, these teeth would indicate that Megalodon had survived far more recently than the established extinction date of 3.6 million years ago. The claim was widely reported. It generated enormous public excitement. It was cited as evidence by those inclined to believe in Megalodon's survival that the shark might still be alive in the deep ocean. But the age determination was flawed. and subsequent analysis revealed why. Ferromanganese crusts accumulate slowly over millions of years from minerals precipitated out of seawater. Teeth and other objects that fall onto the seafloor can become incorporated into these crusts as the crust grows over and around them. The apparent age of an object within a crust is determined by the growth rate of the crust around it. The problem is that teeth can be reworked, moved by deep-sea currents or by bottom-disturbing processes, and incorporated into younger portions of a crust, even if the teeth themselves are much older. A Megalodon tooth deposited on the seafloor 3 million years ago could be reworked into a crust layer that is only tens of thousands of years old, giving the appearance of a very young age for a very old tooth. This reworking explanation is now the accepted interpretation of the apparently young Pacific teeth. The teeth are not young, they are old teeth in young crust. The evidence for Megalodon's recent survival does not exist. The ocean keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its records, and the record, read carefully, says the same thing that it has always said. Megalodon is gone. The size debate, the question of exactly how large the largest Megalodon individuals were, has been one of the most productive and most contentious areas of active research in recent years. The 2021 study by Catalina Pimiento and colleagues, which applied rigorous statistical methods to the largest available dataset of Megalodon tooth measurements, produced size estimates that were somewhat more conservative than some earlier, more speculative estimates. Using the best available scaling relationships, derived from multiple lamniform shark species rather than from the great white alone, the study estimated that typical adult Megalodon individuals were probably in the range of 10 to 15 meters, with the very largest individuals perhaps approaching 16 to 18 meters. These estimates represent a slight downward revision from the 18 to 20 meter figures that have been circulating in some popular accounts, but they still describe an animal of extraordinary scale, significantly larger than any shark alive today and larger than most marine mammals. The same study also produced the most detailed estimates yet of other aspects of Megalodon's biology from tooth proportions alone. The estimated width of the upper first anterior tooth, the large central front tooth, in a 16-meter individual was approximately 17 to 18 centimeters. The estimated jaw width, the distance from left to right across the front of the open mouth, was approximately 2.7 meters. The estimated jaw height, the distance from upper to lower jaw at full gape, was approximately 2.1 meters. A mouth nearly 3 meters wide, over 2 meters from upper jaw to lower jaw at full gape, an opening that could accommodate a small car. These are the dimensions of a predator without parallel in the modern world, and they are derived not from speculation or from science fiction, but from the careful, rigorous application of the best available scaling relationships to the largest available dataset of actual fossil teeth. The science produces numbers that seem impossible, and yet those numbers are what the evidence supports. Let us talk about the question of Megalodon's speed, because speed, for a predator that hunts large, fast-moving prey, is an ecological necessity, and the speed of Megalodon has been estimated through multiple approaches. The hydrodynamic modeling of large shark bodies, using the known geometry of the Megalodon body plan, as inferred from related species and from the tooth and vertebral material, suggests swimming speeds that are consistent with those of modern large lamniform sharks, scaled appropriately for the larger body size. Modern great white sharks cruise at approximately 3 to 5 kilometers per hour during routine swimming, with burst speeds during predatory strikes of perhaps 25 to 35 kilometers per hour. These are not the fastest fish in the ocean. Tuna and sailfish exceed these speeds significantly, but they are sui ocean for a predator whose primary hunting strategy involves an ambush approach rather than a sustained pursuit. For Megalodon, the scaling of swimming speed with body size is not straightforward. Larger animals generally produce more thrust per stroke due to their larger muscle mass and tail area, but the drag they experience also increases with size. The net UU-10 cruising speed depends on the specific proportions of the body, the aspect ratio of the tail, the fineness ratio of the body, the specific geometry of the pectoral fins. Current estimates suggest that Megalodon's cruising speed was broadly comparable to that of a large modern lamniform shark, perhaps 3 to 5 kilometers per hour in routine cruising, with higher burst speeds during active predatory approaches. The burst speed during an attack strike is estimated by some researchers at perhaps 18 to 20 kilometers per hour, slower than a great white's maximum burst, but sufficient for approaching large whale prey that is unlikely to be fleeing at full speed before the attack. These are not the extraordinary speeds sometimes attributed to Megalodon in popular accounts, but they are the speeds of an euclid predator, sufficient for the hunting strategy that the fossil evidence suggests, in an ocean where the prey were large and relatively slow compared to the fish and pinnipeds hunted by faster, smaller predators. There is one aspect of Megalodon's ecology that we have not yet addressed in sufficient depth, its role in the broader trophic structure of the Miocene and Pliocene Ocean, and what the loss of that role meant for the ecosystems that followed. Modern marine ecology has extensively documented the concept of the trophic cascade, the chain of ecological use that follows the removal of an apex predator from an ecosystem. When wolves were removed from Yellowstone National Park in the early 20th century, elk populations increased, overgrazing riverbanks, destabilizing streambanks, altering the physical geography of river systems across the park. When wolves were reintroduced in 1995, the cascade reversed, elk behavior changed, vegetation recovered, rivers were stabilized. The removal of Megalodon from the Miocene and Pliocene Ocean was a trophic cascade of extraordinary magnitude, a cascade that played out across the entire global ocean, eucting every species connected to Megalodon through the food web. The most immediate euct was on the large whale populations that Megalodon had been regulating through predation. Without the mortality pressure imposed by Megalodon, whale populations were free to increase, and the large filter-feeding baleen whales, freed from the predation risk that had constrained their use of certain areas and certain behaviors, were able to increase in body size, in population density, and in the depth of their exploitation of the food resources available in the cooling post-Megalodon ocean. The blue whale, the largest animal that has ever existed, at approximately 180 tons, is a Pliocene and Pleistocene phenomenon. Its extreme body size, which requires the feeding efficiency of a very large filter feeder to sustain, may have been enabled, at least in part, by the removal of the apex predator that had previously constrained the evolution of very large whale body sizes. Megalodon's extinction was not simply the disappearance of one species. It was the release of an evolutionary constraint that had been shaping the evolution of the entire large animal community of the ocean for 20 million years. The ocean that followed was, in some ways, built on Megalodon's absence. The ongoing scientific research into Megalodon is more active today than at any previous point in its history, driven by new techniques, new specimens, and a new generation of researchers bringing fresh approaches to old questions. Isotopic analysis, as we discussed, has provided direct evidence for Megalodon's body temperature and its metabolic status. But isotopic chemistry can also tell us about diet in more detail than the simple identification of prey taxer from bite marks. Carbon isotope ratios in Megalodon tooth and amyloid record the isotopic composition of the food that the shark consumed, and by comparison with the isotopic values of potential prey species from the same formations, researchers can make inferences about which prey species contributed most to the shark's diet at specific times and places in its history. This dietary isotope work is still in its early stages for Megalodon, but preliminary results from several sites are consistent with a diet dominated by large marine mammals, consistent with the qualitative evidence from bite-marked whale bones, but providing quantitative information about the relative contribution of deuterate prey types. The molecular work is also advancing. While the recovery of DNA from megalodon teeth is almost certainly impossible, the conditions required for DNA preservation are far more restrictive than those required for tooth mineralization, and no megalodon tooth has provided convincing ancient DNA. The recovery of ancient proteins from fossil material is a diurent matter. Ancient proteins, preserved in the mineral matrix of fossil teeth and bones, have been recovered from specimens tens of millions of years old. For megalodon, whose teeth are mineralized in conditions that should be relatively conducive to protein preservation, the recovery of ancient protein sequences is a theoretical possibility. And if ancient megalodon proteins can be recovered and sequenced, they can provide phylogenetic information about the shark's evolutionary relationships that teeth alone cannot supply. This work has not yet succeeded for megalodon as of the most recent literature, but the techniques that might make it possible are advancing rapidly. The molecular paleontology of ancient sharks is a frontier, and megalodon sits at the center of it. There is a human truth embedded in the story of megalodon that deserves its own space before we close. We are drawn to megalodon because it represents something that is simultaneously very familiar and completely beyond us. Familiar because it is a shark, and sharks, in our cultural imagination, occupy a specific and vivid place as symbols of marine danger, of the predatory unknown, of the ocean's capacity to be something other than a pleasant place for boats and swimmers. We understand sharks, emotionally if not always scientifically. We have a relationship with them, complicated, often fear-based, occasionally admiring, that goes back to the earliest coastal human cultures. And megalodon is a shark of impossible dimensions. It takes the thing we already find compelling and disturbing and fascinating, and scales it up to a magnitude that the imagination cannot quite contain. It is familiar enough to be graspable and enormous enough to be overwhelming. That combination, the familiar made monstrous, the known expanded beyond knowable scale, is one of the most powerful psychological hooks in all of natural history. It is why megalodon has generated more popular interest than many better documented and scientifically more important prehistoric animals. It is why films about megalodon gross hundreds of millions of dollars, while scientifically rigorous documentaries about the Miocene ocean struggle to find audiences. We are drawn to the edge of what we can imagine. Megalodon is at that edge, and standing at that edge, looking over it into the Miocene ocean, where something of that scale moved through the water, is one of the most vivid experiences that the fossil record can provide. The teeth make it real. The teeth put the Miocene ocean in your hand, and holding it, even briefly, even partially, even in the imperfect and always provisional way that science holds things, is worth the EU art of understanding what the teeth are, and what they came from, and why, eventually, they stopped accumulating on the floor of a cooling Pliocene sea. One final thing before we close. There are people alive today who have spent their careers studying megalodon, whose professional lives have been dedicated to understanding the teeth, the scaling relationships, the isotope chemistry, the ecology of an animal that has been extinct for nearly 4 million years. Paleontologists who have waded through the shallows of North Carolina beaches searching the exposed limestone for teeth. Geochemists who have spent months preparing and analyzing samples of megalodon in amyloid in search of isotopic signals. Biomechanical engineers who have built computer models of megalodon jaws and tested them against the constraints of physics. These people have given their professional lives to a shark they will never see, to the reconstruction of an animal whose existence must be entirely inferred from fragments of mineralized tissue and from the patterns left in the bones of the whales it hunted. The dedication required for this work, the patience, the attention to detail, the willingness to spend a career building an understanding of something fundamentally inaccessible, is one of the most remarkable expressions of human curiosity available. We cannot bring megalodon back. We cannot see it. We cannot hear it. We cannot measure the force of its bite in real time, or watch it hunt, or observe its nursery behavior, or listen to whatever sounds it made in the Miocene ocean. But we can know it, imperfectly, provisionally, always subject to revision, but know it with the rigor and the honesty and the accumulated EUIT of a scientific community that has been working on this question for 350 years. The teeth are in the museums, the papers are in the journals, the knowledge is in the world. Megalodon is known, and knowing it is, in the only way available to a species separated from the Miocene by 4 million years, and from the first tooth stone by 3.5 centuries, the closest thing to meeting it that we will ever have. Let us talk about the specific geological formations where Megalodon is most commonly found, because the rock that holds the teeth is itself a story, and understanding where the teeth come from deepens our understanding of the world those teeth belong to. The Calvert Clay-Us of Maryland, running along the western shore of Chesapeake Bay, are one of the most famous Megalodon localities in the world. The Clay-Us expose the Calvert Formation, a Miocene marine deposit laid down approximately 10 to 17 million years ago on the floor of a warm, shallow sea that covered much of what is now the Atlantic coastal plain of eastern North America. The Calvert Formation is extraordinarily fossiliferous. Cetacean barenons, ribs, vertebrae, skull fragments from a diverse community of Miocene whales and dolphins erode from the Clay-Us constantly, falling to the beach below where they are collected by fossil hunters who have been working this shoreline for generations. And among those cetacean bones, with a frequency that reflects Megalodon's status as the dominant predator of this ancient sea, are teeth. At low tide, the base of the Clay-Us is accessible, and the beach below them is one of the most productive casual fossil collecting sites on the eastern seaboard. Megalodon teeth wash out of the clay letter 1B0 face with every storm, every high tide, every wave that undercuts the soft Miocene sediment. Some days the beach yields nothing. Other days, after a significant storm, collectors find multiple teeth in a single walk. The Calvert Clay-Us are a living laboratory, an ongoing, continuous excavation conducted not by paleontologists with brushes and dental picks, but by the Chesapeake Bay itself, wave by wave and tide by tide, exposing the Miocene ocean floor one storm at a time. The Venice Beach area of Florida, specifically the stretch of Gulf Coast near Venice, Florida, has become known as the shark tooth capital of the world, and Megalodon teeth are found there in numbers that have made the area a destination for fossil collectors from around the globe. The teeth at Venice come from multiple Miocene and Pliocene formations exposed on the Usher seafloor and in the coastal erosion zones, formations that are somewhat younger and somewhat older than the Calvert material, spanning a broader range of the Megalodon timeline. The warm, shallow Gulf waters of the late Miocene and Pliocene were prime Megalodon habitat, productive coastal seas, warm enough to support the nursery requirements of the young, rich enough in cetacean prey to sustain large adults. At Venice, the teeth are found on the beach and in the shallow near-shore waters. Scuba divers work the ashore sand flats and ledges, sifting through the shell ash and gravel of the seablow for the dark, heavy teeth that have eroded from the underlying rock. Snorkelers find teeth at the base of the beach, where the wave wash cuts into the sand. Children find them at the waterline after storms. The democratic accessibility of Megalodon at Venice, the fact that a child with a snorkel mask and a bucket can spend an afternoon in the warm Gulf water and come home with a genuine Megalodon tooth, is one of the most unusual features of this animal's relationship with the public. It is not behind glass in a museum case. It is in the water, and you can find it. The Bone Valley Formation of central Florida is a diurent kind of Megalodon locality, not a coastal outcrop accessible by beach walking, but a sequence of Miocene marine phosphate deposits exposed by commercial phosphate mining in Polk and Hillsborough counties. Like the Lee Creek mine in North Carolina, the Bone Valley Formation has been exposed by industry extraction, in this case, the open-pit phosphate mining that has operated in central Florida for well over a century. The mining exposes the Miocene sediments and concentrates the fossils, including megalodon teeth, cetacean bones, manatee bones, turtle shells, and the remains of dozens of other Miocene marine species, in the tailings and spoil piles that surround the active mine areas. The Bone Valley material is particularly significant for the study of juvenile megalodon. The smaller teeth found in these deposits, teeth from animals whose body length might have been only 2 or 3 meters, suggest that this warm, shallow, nutrient-rich inland sea of the Miocene was used as a nursery area by young megalodon. The abundance of smaller cetacean prey in the same formation, small dolphins, porpoises, and dugongs, would have provided appropriate food for juvenile sharks learning to hunt. The Central Florida Phosphate region is a window into the early life of Megalodon, the phase of the animal's biology that is least well understood, and that was most critical to the survival of the species across its 20-million-year existence. The worldwide distribution of Megalodon fossil sites tells a story about the global reach of this animal that deserves to be explicitly traced. In Europe, Megalodon teeth are found in the Miocene and Pliocene deposits of multiple countries. Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany have yielded teeth from the North Sea Basin formations, ancient shallow seas that covered parts of northwestern Europe during warm Miocene intervals. France, Spain, and Portugal have teeth from Atlantic coastal formations. The Mediterranean Basin, a sea that was, in the Miocene, a much larger and more connected body of water than today, has yielded teeth from Italy, Malta, and various North African coastal deposits. In African, Megalodon teeth are found in Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, the North African margins of the Tethys Sea and its successors. In South Africa, teeth have been found in coastal deposits representing the cold upwelling system of the Benguela Current, suggesting that Megalodon was capable of ranging into cooler waters than its warm water nursery preference might suggest. In Asia, teeth are known from Japan, China, India, and various Southeast Asian islands. The warm, shallow seas of the Indo-Pacific were among the most productive Miocene marine environments on Earth, and the teeth found in these regions reflect Megalodon's exploitation of the rich cetacean communities that inhabited these waters. In Australia and New Zealand, teeth are found in coastal Miocene and Pliocene formations, evidence of Megalodon in the southern hemisphere, in waters that would have been somewhat cooler than the tropical epicenters of the species distribution. The global map of Megalodon tooth localities is essentially a map of the Miocene and Pliocene oceans' productive margins, the shallow, warm, prey-rich coastal zones where large cetaceans congregated and where Megalodon followed them. It is a map of predation across 20 million years of ocean history. There is a competition that Megalodon faced in the Miocene and Pliocene ocean that we have not yet fully discussed. The competition not just with Leviathan and other large-toothed whales, but with a diverse community of large shark species that occupied the same broad ecological guild. The fossil record of Miocene and Pliocene marine deposits consistently shows multiple large shark species coexisting in the same formations as Megalodon. The myco-sharks, Isura species, fast and agile predators of fish and smaller marine mammals, were present throughout the Megalodon interval. Various extinct lamniform sharks of intermediate size occupied the waters between the small fish-eating sharks and the giant apex predator. This community of large sharks was, in ecological terms, a set of overlapping competitors at the urine size ranges. Megalodon competed most directly with the largest members of this community, the other very large sharks, for the large whale prey that represented the highest energy food resource. But it also competed indirectly with all of them for the smaller cetacean prey that juvenile and subadult Megalodon depended on. The competition was managed, as ecological competition usually is, through size-based partitioning and behavioral avoidance. Smaller sharks avoided the areas and prey types dominated by Megalodon. Megalodon, with its great size advantage, was able to access prey that smaller competitors could not deal with. The system worked. For 20 million years, multiple large shark species coexisted in the Miocene Ocean without any single species monopolizing all resources. When the ocean changed at the end of the Pliocene, and the resources that had sustained this diverse community declined, the competitive dynamics shifted. The smaller, faster, more metabolically efficient great white shark was better positioned than Megalodon to survive in the leaner, cooler, reorganized Pliocene Ocean. The largest shark, paradoxically, was the most vulnerable to the changing conditions. Its extraordinary size, which had been its greatest asset in the rich Miocene Ocean, became a liability when the whale communities that sustained it declined. Size was the answer to the Miocene Ocean. It was not the answer to the Pliocene Ocean. The question of how Megalodon found its prey, how it located large whale targets in the vast three-dimensional space of the open ocean, is one that the fossil record cannot directly answer, but that we can approach through what we know about the sensory capabilities of modern lamniform sharks. Modern great white sharks use multiple sensory systems to locate prey. The lateral line, a system of mechanoreceptors running along the sides of the body, detects pressure waves and vibrations in the water, including the low-frequency vibrations produced by large animals moving through the water at distances of hundreds of meters. The ampullae of Lorenzini, the jelly-filled pores visible on the snout of many sharks, detect the weak electrical fields generated by the muscle activity of other animals, providing precise location information at close range. And smell. The shark's sense of smell is among the most sensitive in the animal kingdom, capable of detecting blood and other biological compounds at concentrations of parts per billion in waterborne chemical trails that can extend for kilometers downwind of their source. Megalodon had all of these sensory systems, almost certainly in forms comparable to or exceeding those of the modern great white shark. An animal hunting very large prey in the open ocean needs long-range detection capability, the ability to locate a whale at a distance great enough to allow a strategic approach before the prey is alerted. The chemical trail of a large whale in the ocean is an extraordinary thing. The biological compounds shed by a whale's skin, the metabolic products released through its body, the physical disturbance of the water column as it swims, all of these create a detectable signature that extends far behind the moving animal. A shark following that chemical trail, with a nose sensitive to parts per billion concentrations, can track a whale across kilometers of open water. Megalodon did not hunt by chance encounter. It found its prey at distance, tracked it, and approached strategically. The sensory apparatus for this, inherited from its lamniform ancestors and refined over 20 million years of hunting large whales, was as sophisticated as the jaws that completed the attack. There is a beach in Morocco, near the coastal town of Ouled Abdoun, in the phosphate deposits that have also yielded so many remarkable mosasaur specimens, where Megalodon teeth can be found in association with the bones of very large Miocene whales. The phosphate deposits of Morocco span the late Cretaceous through the Miocene, and in the Miocene layers, the fauna is dominated by the large marine mammals and their predators that characterized the warm Tethys Sea of that period. The Megalodon teeth from this locality, some of them among the largest found anywhere in the world, were produced by animals hunting in the warm, productive waters of the ancient North African coast. The Moroccan phosphate deposits are worked commercially, as they are in Florida, and fossil material is routinely exposed and collected from the mining operations. Local workers and fossil dealers who work with them have assembled impressive collections of Miocene marine material from these sites over many decades. Much of this material has found its way into museum collections and into the scientific literature, contributing significantly to what we know about the Miocene marine flora of the eastern Tethys. The Megalodon teeth from Morocco are particularly prized by collectors for their size and preservation. The phosphate environment is favorable for tooth preservation, and large, well-preserved specimens are more commonly found here than in many other world localities. From a Miocene ocean that covered what is now the Sahara Desert, the teeth of the world's largest predatory shark erode into the phosphate dust of a modern mine and find their way, eventually, into the hands of people who know what they are. The deep past is closer than we think. Sometimes it is underfoot. Let us spend a moment considering what the final years, the final centuries, the final millennia of Megalodon's existence might have looked like. Not in terms of dramatic events. There was almost certainly no single moment of Megalodon's extinction, no last great predatory act, no final death witnessed by any creature capable of understanding what it meant. Instead, the end of Megalodon was almost certainly the gradual statistical dwindling of a population under increasing pressure, the slow attrition of a species whose reproductive rate could no longer keep pace with its mortality rate, in conditions that were less and less hospitable to its specific ecological requirements. The last Megalodon populations were probably the most tropical ones, the animals living in the warmest remaining shallow water environments, where the temperatures they required for reproduction and juvenile development were still available. The cooler high-latitude populations had already declined or disappeared as the global cooling of the late Pliocene pushed tropical conditions toward the equator. What was the last Megalodon's world like? Smaller, warmer only in a narrow tropical band. The large whale communities that had sustained its ancestors for 20 million years were changing, some species declining, some shifting to cooler waters that the Megalodon could not follow. The nursery habitats that juvenile Megalodon required, warm, shallow coastal waters rich in small cetacean prey, were contracting. And in the cooler, cleaner, more open waters just outside the shrinking tropics, the great white shark was thriving. Faster, leaner, metabolically cheaper to run, capable of hunting the pinnipeds that dominated the cooling coastal waters in a way that Megalodon's size made an efficient. The last Megalodon did not know it was the last. It hunted. It fed when feeding was possible. It produced teeth, dozens of them, over the course of its life, sinking to the floor of the last warm sea it inhabited. Those teeth are still in the rock, still waiting, some of them, to be found. The animal that produced them lived approximately 3.6 million years ago in a warm tropical sea that no longer exists, and died without knowing that it was the end of 20 million years of extraordinary predatory history. The teeth endure, the ocean endures, and the knowledge of what they represent, patiently accumulated across 3.5 centuries of human inquiry, endures too. That was 100 facts about Megalodon, the largest predatory shark that has ever lived. From the tongue stones of ancient Rome to Nicholas Stano's 1667 recognition of the truth, from Louis Agassiz's 1843 naming to the 2021 isotopic studies that confirmed Megalodon's warm-blooded metabolism, from the Calvert Clay-Ez of Maryland to the phosphate mines of Morocco to the Venice Beach shallows of Florida, from the 20-million-year history of the species to the 3.6-million-year-old tooth that marks its end. 100 facts, and through every one of them the animal remains exactly what it is, the most extraordinary predatory fish that the history of life has produced, extinct for nearly 4 million years, known only from its teeth, and through the patience and the rigor and the genuine wonder of the scientists who have studied those teeth, known better and more completely and more truly than most people realize. The ocean keeps its secrets in stone, and the stone eventually gives them up. The teeth are everywhere. Pick one up, hold it. The Mycene Ocean is in your hand. This has been Sleepy Dino. Good night. There is a specific kind of silence that settles over a person who holds a Megalodon tooth for the first time, not the silence of not knowing what to say, but the silence of a mind briefly overwhelmed by the distance between the object in the hand and the world that produced it. The tooth is dense, heavier than it looks. The surface has the quality of old, polished stone, smooth in some areas, rough with tiny surface features in others. The dark coloration, the iron-stained brown or black, that distinguishes fossil teeth from modern ones, speaks to the chemistry of a million years of slow mineralization, of groundwater moving through sediment, of the original calcium phosphate being gradually replaced and reinforced by new mineral depositing atom by atom in the spaces between the original crystals. The serrations along the edge are still sharp, not knife sharp. The enameloid has been worn and recrystallized over millions of years, but distinctly, measurably serrated. You can feel them with a fingertip. The deliberate, precise spacing of those serrations, the biological engineering of a tool designed to cut through whale blubber with maximum efficiency, is preserved across 3 million years, 4 million years, 10 million years. Whatever wore down the original surface has not erased the design. The tooth sits in the hand, heavy, real, a physical object that was once part of the jaw of the largest predatory fish in the history of life on Earth, and the hand holding it belongs to a member of a species that did not exist when the tooth was made, in a world so diurent from the Miocene that the two might as well be separate planets. And yet the tooth connects them, is, in its physical presence, the bridge between those two worlds, the most direct contact available between the 21st century and the Miocene ocean. This is what fossil collecting is at its deepest level, not the accumulation of objects. The accumulation of connections, the building of bridges across time that no other discipline, not history, not archaeology, not any branch of the humanities, can construct, because those disciplines cannot reach back before the existence of human beings. Paleontology reaches back to the Megalodon, to the Mosasaurus, to the Triceratops, to the Brontosaurus, to the Quetzalcoatlus, to every extraordinary animal that lived and died and left its traces in the rock of this planet across billions of years of biological history. And the tooth in the hand is the end point of that reach, the physical evidence that the reach succeeded, that the connection was made. Hold it, feel the weight of it, the serrations under the fingertip, the smooth enameloid surface, and the dense, heavy root. 3 million years of ocean and geology brought it to the surface of a Florida beach. And 350 years of science told you what it is. That combination, the geological patience that preserved it, and the human curiosity that understood it, is one of the most extraordinary partnerships in the history of this planet. There is a question that comes up whenever Megalodon is discussed with any depth, and it is a question that cuts to the heart of what extinction means and what the loss of a species represents. Is the ocean worse without Megalodon? The question is not ecological in the technical sense. It is not asking about specific measurable outcomes of trophic cascade eucs or about the population dynamics of modern cetaceans in the absence of their ancient predator. It is asking something more fundamental, whether the ocean as a place, as an environment, as an ecosystem, is diminished by the absence of the largest predatory fish that ever lived in it. The ecological answer is nuanced. The ocean without Megalodon is an ocean in which whale populations are less regulated by predation at the apex, an ocean in which the evolutionary pressure toward larger whale body size is less constrained, an ocean in which the trophic structure of the upper food web is organized around great white sharks and orcas rather than around a 50-ton apex predator of incomparably greater scale. These are real diurgences. They are not trivial, but whether they represent a worse ocean or simply a diurgent ocean is a value judgment, but ecology alone cannot make. The human answer, the answer that the persistent fascination with Megalodon in popular culture suggests, is something more emotional. There is a sense, widely shared even among people with no particular interest in paleontology, that a world containing something of that scale and that predatory capability was a richer world, a more extraordinary world, a world in which the ocean had a dimension of the extreme that the modern ocean lacks. Whether that sense reflects something real or is simply the imaginative projection of a species that romanticizes the dangerous and the large, it is genuinely felt, and it motivates the ongoing curiosity, the tooth collecting, the documentary watching, the Wikipedia diving at midnight, that keeps Megalodon in the public consciousness decades and centuries after its discovery. The ocean is not worse without Megalodon in any ecological sense that can be precisely measured. but it is diuret, and in the diurets there is a loss, not a loss that any living thing mourns, but a loss that the records of the ancient world make legible to the species capable of reading them. We can read the records, we can know what was there, and in knowing we can feel the absence, not as grief exactly, but as the particular awareness that the world has been, in another time, more extraordinary than it currently is. That awareness is not morbid, it is instructive. It is one of the things that paleontology is for. The Miocene epoch, the period that was, for most of its 23 million year duration, the world of Megalodon, was not simply characterized by warm seas and abundant whales. It was also the period during which the world we currently inhabit was being assembled. The continents were moving toward their current positions. The Himalayas, driven upward by the collision of India with Eurasia, were reaching elevations that would eventually disrupt global atmospheric circulation patterns. The Antarctic ice sheet was forming and growing. The gradual closure of the Tethys Sea, the ancient ocean that had connected the present-day Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, was reorganizing the oceanic circulation of the entire eastern hemisphere. These are the same geological changes that by the Pliocene would contribute to Megalodon's extinction. The world that produced Megalodon was simultaneously producing the conditions that would end it. The geological processes that created the warm, connected, cetacean-rich Miocene ocean were in their continuation producing the cooler, more isolated, diurnally organized Pliocene ocean that the giant shark could not survive. This is not tragedy in the human sense. It is geology. It is the implacable operation of the physical processes that have been reshaping this planet since its formation, and that will continue to reshape it long after we are gone. But knowing the mechanism does not make the outcome less extraordinary. The largest predatory fish that ever lived was ended not by competition, not by a faster, stronger, better adapted successor that defeated it in direct encounter. It was ended by the slow, impersonal movement of continents and the gradual cooling of an ocean. Megalodon was defeated by geology, by the planet itself, reorganizing over millions of years into something that had no place for an animal of its specific requirements. There is something almost moving about that. The most formidable predatory fish in the history of life on Earth ended not by anything it could fight or flee from, but by the inexorable geological processes that govern this planet and everything that lives on it, including, eventually, us. The Megalodon tooth on the beach is not just a fossil. It is a message from the Miocene Ocean, a message sent in mineral and crystal structure, encoded in isotope ratios and an amyloid microstructure, and the precise geometry of serrations designed for cutting whale blubber. The message says, something extraordinary was here, something that exceeded the scale of what the modern ocean can produce, something that shaped the evolution of the large marine mammals whose descendants still swim in every ocean today. And then the message says, it is gone. Both parts of the message matter, the presence and the absence, the extraordinary capability and the eventual ending, the 20 million years of existence and the 3.6 million years of non-existence that followed. The tooth holds both messages simultaneously. It is evidence of existence and evidence of extinction in the same object, a life that was lived and a life that ended, compressed into a triangle of dark brown mineralized enameloid that fits in the palm of a human hand. That is what a fossil is. That is what every fossil is, from the smallest shell to the largest dinosaur bone. Evidence that something was here and evidence that it is not here anymore. The presence of the past in the present. The bridge. Pick up the tooth, feel the weight of it. Both messages are there. The Miocene Ocean is in your hand, and through the tooth you are touching it. There is one more aspect of the Megalodon story that deserves attention before we close, the question of what studying this animal has contributed to our understanding of sharks in general, and of the modern ocean in which those sharks still live. The study of Megalodon has been, among other things, a laboratory for developing and refining the methods used to estimate the biology of extinct sharks from fossil teeth alone. The scaling relationships between tooth size and body length, developed and tested against modern shark species, are not used only for Megalodon. They are applied across the entire fossil record of lamniform sharks, helping researchers reconstruct the body sizes of dozens of extinct species from the fragmentary evidence of their teeth. The isotopic methods developed to study Megalodon body temperature have been applied to other extinct shark lineages, building a broader picture of the thermal physiology of ancient coelacanths, a picture that was entirely inaccessible before the development of these techniques. The biomechanical models built to understand Megalodon's bite force and jaw mechanics have informed our understanding of the jaw mechanics of modern sharks and of the evolution of the lamniform feeding apparatus across its entire history. Megalodon, in other words, has been not just a subject of study, but a driver of methodological development, an animal so extreme in its dimensions that it forced the development of analytical approaches that then found broader application across the entire field of shark paleontology. The largest shark in the history of life pushed the tools of the science further than they had gone before, and those tools, refined in the EU ought to understand Megalodon, are now used to understand everything else. Modern sharks are in crisis. The populations of many shark species have declined dramatically over the last century, driven primarily by overfishing, both targeted fishing for shark fins and shark meat, and incidental bycatch in fisheries targeting other species. The International Union for Conservation of Nature estimates that approximately 1/3 of all shark and ray species are currently threatened with extinction. The connection between this modern crisis and the ancient history of Megalodon is not obvious, but it is real. Sharks have been the apex predators of the ocean for over 400 million years, longer than the dinosaurs existed, longer than the first plants colonized the land, longer than most of the major animal groups we know today have existed. They have survived 5 mass extinctions. They have outlasted the trilobites, the ammonites, the ichthyosaurs, the plesiosaurs, the mosasaurs, and the non-avian dinosaurs. They are, in a very real sense, one of the most successful biological designs in the history of life on Earth. The shark body plan, streamlined, efficient, sensory-rich, continuously tooth-replacing, adaptable across an extraordinary range of oceanic environments, has persisted, with modifications, across 400 million years of changing oceans. Megalodon was the extreme expression of that design, the largest, the most powerful, the most ecologically dominant member of a lineage that has never stopped being one of the ocean's defining features. The modern ocean needs its sharks, not because of any sentimental or nostalgic reason, and not as a replacement for Megalodon, but because sharks, as apex predators, perform the same regulatory functions in the modern ocean that Megalodon performed in the Miocene Ocean, controlling the populations of the animals below them in the food web, shaping their behavior, influencing the structure of the entire marine ecosystem from the top down. Remove the sharks, and the ocean changes. The prey populations they regulate increase beyond the carrying capacity of their food resources and then collapse. The food web destabilizes. The ecological structure that has been built over millions of years of predator-prey coevolution begins to unravel. The modern ocean without its sharks would be a diminished ocean in ways that are directly analogous to the post-Megalodon ocean, an ocean without its apex regulator, reorganizing in ways that are ecologically unpredictable and potentially irreversible. Megalodon tells us, in the evidence of its existence and the evidence of its ecological role, what large predatory sharks mean to the health of the ocean, and in telling us that it makes the case, more powerfully than any contemporary conservation argument alone can, for the importance of protecting what remains. The tooth in your hand, the beach, the shallow water, the ancient ocean underfoot. Megalodon swam in seas that are now dry land, in water that is now rock, in a world that no human being has ever seen. And yet we know it. We know its size, its weight, its bite force, its body temperature, its diet, its hunting strategy, its nursery habitats, its extinction. We know it because of 350 years of scientific out applied to the evidence it left behind. The teeth that are still washing ashore, still eroding from coastal clayes, still lying on the floor of every ocean in the world. We know it because Nicholas Steno looked at the tongue stone in 1667 and asked the right question. Because Louis Agassiz examined a collection of large serrated teeth in 1843 and gave them a name. Because generations of paleontologists, geochemists, biomechanical engineers, and isotope chemists have built, layer by layer, the understanding that we now have of what those teeth represent. The knowledge is imperfect. It is provisional. It is subject to revision as new evidence emerges and new techniques are developed. That is the nature of knowledge about things that are inaccessible, things locked behind the barrier of deep time, knowable only through inference and analogy and careful analysis of indirect evidence. But the knowledge is real. It is grounded in evidence. It represents the best current understanding of a species that existed for 20 million years, that hunted the largest prey in the history of the ocean, and that left its record in the teeth that are still, today, the most widely distributed and most commonly encountered megafossil on Earth. Pick one up. Hold it. The Miocene Ocean is in your hand. That was 100 facts about Megalodon. The great tooth, the largest predatory fish that has ever lived, an animal of extraordinary capability and extraordinary duration, ended by a cooling ocean and the slow movement of continents, and known to us through the patient, rigorous, endlessly rewarding work of science applied to the evidence it left behind. This has been Sleepy Dino. Good night. There is one final thing to say about what the study of Megalodon reveals, not about the shark itself, but about the ocean it left behind. The Pliocene Ocean that formed in Megalodon's absence was not simply a warmer or cooler version of the Miocene. It was a structurally deherent place. The closure of the Central American Seaway, completed approximately 3 million years ago, separated the Pacific and Atlantic for the first time in tens of millions of years. The consequences were immediate and cascading: new ocean current patterns, new upwelling zones, new temperature gradients, new nutrient distributions. The Atlantic, cut O letter 1b0 from the warm equatorial Pacific flow, began to cool. The Gulf Stream, now uninterrupted by any equatorial exchange, intensified, carrying warm water north and driving the deep circulation patterns, but eventually produced the ice ages. The ice ages themselves, the great Pleistocene glacial cycles that define the last 2.5 million years of Earth's history, are, in a very real sense, the geological legacy of the same processes that ended Megalodon: the closure of the seaway, the cooling of the ocean, the formation of the ice sheets. The world that produced us, the Ice Age world, the world of glacials and interglacials, the world whose climate cycles shaped the evolution of the human lineage, was built on the same planetary changes that ended the Miocene Ocean, where Megalodon had ruled for 20 million years. Megalodon's extinction and human evolution are not unrelated. They are both consequences of the same deep geological processes playing out on diurent timescales in diurent biological lineages, but driven by the same planetary reorganization. The closure of the Central American Seaway helped end the giant shark. It also, by cooling and restructuring the Northern Hemisphere climate, helped create the oscillating Ice Age world in which our genus evolved. The connection is real, and it is humbling. The same geology that ended Megalodon eventually, through a long and indirect chain of environmental consequences, produced the species that would find its teeth and spent centuries wondering what had made them. The ocean reorganized. The giant shark died. The world cooled. The glaciers came and went. And on the African savanna, in the shadow of geological changes that began with the slow movement of continents 60 million years ago, something new walked upright and began, eventually, to ask questions. The questions led in time to the teeth led in time to Megalodon, and Megalodon leads us, if we follow the thread far enough back to the same geological history that produced us. Everything connects. Across the deep time of this planet, across the extraordinary diversity of its life, across the extinctions and the radiations and the slow, implacable reshaping of continents and oceans, everything connects. The tooth in your hand is part of that connection, and so, remarkably, are you. The story of Megalodon does not end with the animal's extinction. It ends with you. With every person who has ever picked up a dark, triangular, serrated object on a beach and felt something shift in their understanding of time. With every child who has held a hand-sized tooth and asked their parent what animal it came from. With every person who has sat in a museum looking at an enormous jaw reconstruction and felt the scale of the ancient ocean pressing in on them. The story ends with the accumulated human response to the evidence, the wonder, the curiosity, the sustained scientific art, the popular fascination, the films and the documentaries and the textbooks and the conversations. Megalodon has been extinct for nearly 4 million years, but it is more present in human consciousness today, more widely known, more actively studied, more deeply embedded in popular culture than it has been at any point since its actual existence. That is a strange kind of afterlife. Not the afterlife of the supernatural, not the persistence of some ghostly essence beyond the physical facts, but the afterlife of evidence, the persistence of a species not in biology, but in knowledge, in the accumulated understanding of what it was, built from its teeth, and from the ingenuity of the scientists who have spent lifetimes learning to read them. In this sense, Megalodon is not gone. It is known, and being known is, for something that left no living descendants, and that has been absent from the ocean for 4 million years, the most complete form of persistence available. The great tooth is gone, the great knowledge of the great tooth is not. And in that knowledge, imperfect, provisional, always growing, the Miocene ocean lives on. Its most extraordinary inhabitant lives on, in the weight of a dark, serrated triangle in the hand of someone standing at the edge of the modern sea, looking out at the water and knowing, in a way that no generation before the last few centuries could have known, what once swam in it. The ocean is the same ocean. The sky is the same sky. The water that moves against the shore today moved against diurent shores in the Miocene when Megalodon swam through it. And the connection between that water and this one, between that world and this one, is in the tooth. Pick it up. This has been Sleepy Dino. Good night. There is a specific pleasure in knowing that Megalodon teeth are still being found, not in archived collections or behind museum glass, though they are there too, but actively, continuously, right now, washing out of coastal clay and up onto beaches where ordinary people walk. This ongoing discovery is not trivial. It is not simply a matter of collectors finding pretty objects to add to shelves. Each newly found tooth adds a data point to the global map of Megalodon distribution. Each precisely dated tooth refines our understanding of when and where the species was present. Each unusually large or unusually small tooth adds to the data set from which size estimates and population structure are derived. The science of Megalodon is fed, in part, by casual discovery, by the beachcomber who finds a large tooth and reports it, by the diver who photographs an in situ tooth on the seafloor and shares the image with a researcher, by the mine worker who recognizes an unusual specimen and alerts a paleontologist rather than discarding it. This democratization of discovery, the fact that the primary evidence for one of the most studied large extinct animals in the world is accessible to anyone willing to walk the right beach or wade the right shallows, is one of the most unusual features of Megalodon as a scientific subject. No specialized equipment required, no expedition budget, no remote field site in a de-euclid environment, just a beach, a tide, and the willingness to look down. The Megalodon teeth are there. They are coming out of the rock at a rate that has not slowed since the Miocene sediments began to erode. They will continue to come out for as long as the coastal formations that hold them continue to be exposed by the processes of erosion. New discoveries, continuous, every year, every season, at beaches from Maryland to Morocco to New Zealand. The investigation of Megalodon is not a closed chapter. It is an ongoing one. And the next discovery, the tooth that adds something new to the picture, the specimen that refines an estimate or challenges an assumption, might be on the beach at the next low tide. The ocean is still giving up its records, and we are still reading them.